Dr. Jim Weldon, continuing our discussion on the enlightened life from my book, The Secret Journey to the Enlightened Mind. I'm sorry I was a little bit late here. And this one actually was deleted yesterday, so I'm repeating it today as I have the time to do that. I appreciate you taking a moment to listen a little bit about the secret journey to the enlightened mind and the adventure that I've been through in terms of trying to discover myself and opening up the greater policies, the greater possibilities of an enlightened, connected life. And this begins with chapter 5 from my book, The Secret Journey to the Enlightened Mind, which is available online on Amazon, both in an ebook. And I do suggest that if you haven't read that, it might help you understand some of this. And on chapter 5, it's talking about the period in which I discovered religion. And the poem that starts that section starts this way. Those that say they know the purpose of life, they do not know the purpose of life. Those that know the purpose of life will not say they know the purpose of life. If someone comes and says they know, run away. For the truth of life is more expansive, greater than any words can ever convey. So I connected at this, going back a little bit, I was in a very difficult period in my life at this time. My father had passed away. My stepfather was an alcoholic, and there was another family that was destroyed. I was so empathetic, I was able to feel and see a little deeper into individuals. And I realized that many people were living a false life. They looked good on the outside, but the happiness wasn't there inside. And I was really confused about this. And this time in my life, you know, there's two major periods. There's actually a cycle of difficulties in life, just like there's a cycle of good things in life also. And supposedly it's connected with the 40-year cycle associated with Saturn. And most people have two of these in their lives. You'd be lucky if you had one in your early childhood, because these are the difficult times that nothing seems to work well. And I was certainly going through that in these teenage years of my life, and it pushed me to look at religion. So, and there was a small community church run completely by young adults in my house, in my hometown of Cocoa Beach, Florida. And this is where I found religion. And the church was so small that it would only seat about 30 people. And their pastor there, it was actually a teenage church, I guess you could say, was only 18 years old. And this was fine with me. And after the last few years, I'm finished with trusting adults in this period of my life. I'm 50 years old and in 10th grade, and we all think we have the answers there. And we meet twice a week to sing and pray our hearts out. And I really throw myself into prayer, kind of like a marathon runner. I'm going to go for it. And fleeing a tiger, something was after me. And I discovered quickly that I'm pretty good at this. I know how to pray, and I'm really desperate for some answers. To find a group of people my age at that time willing to approach God as a kind of living force, for me, was a great revelation. And we pray twice a week at that small church. And we're saying to ourselves, we've found it. We have truly found it. Belief and acceptance of Jesus is the way. That's it. And at that point in my life, I'm really relieved, because I don't really have to look anymore. I accepted it. I accepted Jesus before, but that wasn't good enough. Now I have to really accept him and set about the task of studying the Bible and intensely praying to him much of the time. And as I give myself to this commitment, something really happens. It seems as though there's some new power or force that's come into my life. And together in the small church, we prayed not only for minutes, but we literally spend hours all evening on our knees praying and praying to God. And in my book, I have a picture of that small little church. Actually, I visited that location in Cocoa Beach. And I do feel liberated, at least without inhibition, to reveal kind of this inner aspect of my life for the first time, and to show how much I want God in my life. So there's nothing to hold back. And together with that small community, I scream and pray and cry to God over and over again until we're really kind of in a hysterical state. It seems to be building up. And I feel vented of emotions. At least I'm able to express those deep emotions. Those that know me over the years, know this aspect of my character. And kind of the joke in the spiritual community I'm associated with, Art of Living Foundation and elsewhere, I'm like a sponge. All you need to do is squeeze it a little bit and the tears come out. But the feeling of utter aloneness and desperation returns after these experiences. So one evening, after I stop praying and others continue, there's a deep feeling of peace that comes over me. And I think, this is it. I close my eyes and completely let go. And that longing for God is really all that I'm feeling at that time. And I experience a freedom, and I reach out for Jesus. If you remember the earlier episodes of this, I was able to feel the presence of a friend of mine that was in the hospital. And then when my father passed, there was the experience of that. It was, to remind you, it was kind of this imaginary telephone that I had as a child. I'd pick up the telephone, I'd dial, and I would feel connected. Of course, now we have internet to connect us all over the world. And so doing that in the field of spirituality and religion, boundary breaks, and I touch Jesus the same way I traveled to the beach in my imaginary mind years ago. And in this experience, I find myself again soaring up and away from that small church as everything disappears, but that longing for the divine. And I understand how people who grow up in a certain community, by the way, as a little aside here, become connected to those things that they're exposed to. Certainly, if you grow up in a certain culture, the attitudes and the beliefs of that culture obviously is much easier to accept than kind of going out on your own and trying to find answers for yourself. Difficult thing to do. And it's very easy just to kind of easily accept what is in front of you and commit ourselves to that. So anyway, as I let myself go into this feeling of longing, a light comes up within me like moonbeams. It fills my awareness. And everything that I know disappears. It dissolves except for this very strong longing for God. And in that awareness, a spiritual presence, I feel that with clarity, and my mind is crying out, it's Jesus, it's Jesus. I see, I feel, I know it. It must be Jesus. I put a title on it, and gradually that elevated feeling of presence fades away, and all the friends in my room returns. And returning, I'm surprised that literally hours have gone unnoticed. The whole evening has gone by into what might appear to me to be a few minutes. And in that instant, I see that kind of deep, kind of hidden longing that is within me could be wonderful. Somehow it brings me the presence of something. And I wonder, is this true? Am I going crazy? Did I really feel God? Why doesn't this happen all the time? Why don't I experience this all the time? And I leave the church that night feeling happy, but frustrated, wanting more. So the next evening we come back. It was so great that evening, everybody wanted to come back. And it's even more intense. And we start a long prayer session. And as things become more, I guess you would call, intense, hysterical, everybody begins to babble. We talk in a babbling language. In the Christian church, sometimes this is talked about as speaking in tongues. We didn't know really what that was, but something was going on. And, I'm saying something kind of Chinese-like. I think it's Chinese. And I feel as if I'm speaking in the foreign language, but I know that I'm saying, oh God, with clarity. So the intensity increases, my body begins to shake, tingling energy runs throughout my body and out into the room. It kind of blasts out in the entire room. And someone cries, oh God, why have you forsaken us? Why have you left us alone in this hell, so far from the truth? And I'm not sure if it's my words or somebody else's. Where's your messenger? Where's your guidance? Where's your light? Save us, oh God, oh God. So with this cry, it's like my voice becomes the deepest desire of everybody in the room. And the energy literally explodes in the room. And things get a little crazy from this point on. It's almost like a zoo with people are crying and screaming, writhing about, rolling on the floor. I've never had anything quite like this happen, certainly in a group of individuals. And I continue to call out God in whatever language I seem to be saying. But in the midst of this, madness, my mind recedes to a great distance, as if I'm only a spectator watching the performance. This actually is one of the characteristics of the inner being. The inner soul is really a spectator, and the mind and the intellect and ego are going through its process. The first time I had something quite like this, and watching this performance. And a teenage friend of mine is talking in another language. I hear his words, I understand in English, but I seem to be answering in another language for saving my mother and my father, who save us all. And the whole church becomes united. The 30 or 40 of us that were in this, kids really, no adults. There's a torrent of immersion, like a fire for God fills the room. So again, the time's perspective changes. And actually, just to understand a little bit about moving into spirituality, time is not the same, this is a little aside, on all the different levels of creation. It's not the same. So, a bee that lives a few weeks, that's an entire lifetime. It's a long time. And for us, 70, 80 years, that's a long time. But I begin to, it's different. Actually, these higher levels of life, which we're just beginning to look at a little deeper, time is not the same. We know about black holes and gravitation and all of that. But anyway, a couple hours pass away and the scene ends. And I wonder what's happening here. And so I leave that night totally filled with enthusiasm that we've touched something really unique. And I decide on that point, okay, I'm going for it. I'm going to leave high school and I'm going to become a preacher. And again, another little aside, years later, the founder of this great worldwide movement, Art of Living, Trish, we were in a small meeting and we were talking about devotion and longing. And I quipped up and I said, I used to be a preacher. And he turned to me and he said, used to be? Used to be? And so anyway, when I arrive home from that evening, I share my experience and my commitment. I'm going to go teach Christianity with my mother. She's actually shocked. And over the next 2 days, as I talk to her, things begin to look a little bit different. I wonder about what happened in that church. I really didn't know. I didn't understand that. In the same way that I seemed to be able to go out in places in my mind's eye, and I found out later, in some cases, those things were true. I wondered, did we go crazy? Was it real? And I began to doubt this. It couldn't have been real. And of course, I can't just quit school and go running around, with the Bible in my hand, quoting scripture. But I really did touch something fantastic and amazing, but also it actually made me afraid. And I was wondering if it was unstable. By the way, at that time, my mother was what we would call in the West a New Ager, and she was interested in kind of the esoteric things that were going on. There were a couple of communities in the Florida area where they did kind of spiritual readings, and I was totally committed to Christianity at this point. We actually changed places over our life, and she moved more into traditional. And of course, as I traveled around the world and met some unbelievably great spiritual teachers over the years and had a chance to study and spend some time, we kind of changed places. So I couldn't go back to that church, and I couldn't risk that whatever happened going again. So I decided at that point, I'm going to take it all private, and I'm not going to share this again, and no one will be hurt or bothered if I keep this to myself. I never talk about it, but I decided that I'm going to just feel that presence, whatever it is, when I'm alone at night. Perhaps that feeling of the presence of what I call Jesus will come again. I don't really ask of things. I long for that present. And I wonder, where are you? Where are you? Come to me. And something in that quiet space did answer, kind of in my imaginary telephone connection technology. And it said, go on and keep searching, and I will come to you in time. You will find me. So this period in my life, it was really difficult for me. I was stretched between two different realities, some of these inner experiences that were beginning to come up. And I was looking for something to answer what was going on here. And I was like a desperate man driven by a terrible storm looking for shelter. And I came to that honestly and fully, to Christianity, and I jumped in. And because, I really had nothing solid to hold me at this point, that sanctuary really looked good. And I met some friends who said they're saved, and I wanted to be saved, whatever it was. And I believed their words because I wanted to be happy but free from suffering too. But, during this time in my life in that little bitty church, I think at this point I experienced one of the pinnacles of typical Christianity. I felt a heavenly presence. I felt a presence of what I call Jesus. And I learned about it, yet I'm left longing for more. There must be more. I'm happier, but that happiness, that pinnacle of happiness, just lasts for a short period of time. And these experiences that I had of what I called God as a child showed me that there really was a larger spiritual universe about me. Nobody I met in my life, obviously at that time, knew how to open the door to that greater dimension to help me sustain a deeper experience permanently. But I realized there was a greater dimension. And I began to see and think that without proper guidance, in any field, I became a doctor, you really do need expert guidance. And in this arena of spirituality, it's a very subtle reality, and guidance into that has many pitfalls. And without proper guidance, I was confused, and I was actually afraid of what I experienced and happened at the church, but it actually made things worse. Because I touched something, but it didn't seem to be continual. And I learned much later, of course, in my life, that there's a fundamental difference between the spiritual traditions, what I call the East and the West traditions. Obviously, it doesn't relate to everybody in those traditions because the world is full of many, many wonderful, great beings who are doing the best that they can. in their growth. Let's say the traditions in the Middle East, the Far East, perhaps some aspects of Christianity, Islam, placed an emphasis on just the belief and acceptance aspect, and others place more of an emphasis upon kind of the inner dimension of that, what I would call the spiritual experience, and are afraid of that just in the same way that I was afraid of that as a child, if it fell outside of their tradition. They say, accept this, believe this, and then that's it. It's over. And the experience of the divine, that may not be a reality. And there's a certain distrust in all these traditions, even of other groups within that, and trying to hold on to a set point of view and saying that this set point of view has all the answers. And this doesn't deny and bring down the sincerity and the reality of these individuals. Not in any way. We're all doing the best that we can, I understand. But, it's a really, really, really big universe out there. And this world as a whole, even our entire spiritual tradition, which seems like maybe it's thousands of years, is really just a tiny drop in that time. And these kind of independent and kind of charismatic church stand on one side, seem to be a little bit more open to some experiences. And at least in my culture, some of the Protestant and Catholic stand on the other side. It's not judging any individual. The possibility, as Christ said, to be perfect as I am perfect. Where is that perfection? How do you open the door to that perfection in your mind and really learn to live in that place, and following that to become one with the Father, the source of all that is? That's not really distressed. Some of these Eastern traditions, perhaps they're a little bit longer, Buddhism, Hinduism, and others, Jainism. There's a whole slew of them. There's really no such thing as Hinduism. Such a huge, vast variety of spiritual experiences. They're certainly open. They put their emphasis upon the kind of the spiritual dimension opening up. And essentially they're saying, experience the divine and then believe. And they offer different methodologies, technologies to do that. And one of those technologies, course later, that I discovered, and that was yoga, which actually means the uniting of the individual mind and the cosmic mind. And that dichotomy really followed me the rest of my life. Just to be told that this is the answer, for me, just for me, was not enough. I accepted in my childhood years the philosophies, the ideas, but I wasn't satisfied. Even when I completely believed that, it wasn't enough. And belief without kind of the inner, deeper spiritual connectedness with one another, the love, the compassion, which we are made of, it leads the path of fanaticism. And it certainly is something that's happened in all of our cultures throughout the world, in all of the religions throughout the world, that without some of that subtle guidance to open up that doorway, it becomes a little bit unbalanced because we want to have answers. We don't want to not have answers. And I appreciated in that community of the church, the experiences were there, but I was scared away by the rejection of anything that I saw was different. And this is really strange when you think about it. We've made such tremendous advance around the world in every area, every field. Think of this technology right here. I can talk to anybody in the world. Anybody can listen to this. Someday I'll be dead and gone out of here, but somebody can listen to this anywhere. It becomes part of the body of knowledge of this world. And we don't have any qualms about eating Chinese, Indian, or Italian food from, and benefiting the discovery of all over the world. But when it comes to a scientific discovery, that can go everywhere. But when it comes from Tibet, for example, it doesn't mean that we become Buddhists when we accept that technology and take advantage of the knowledge. However, when it comes to spiritual wisdom, just this aspect, many are afraid to take advantage of the discoveries of all the great minds and all the great beings in this world, even those discoveries may significantly improve our life. And that's really the story that I'm trying to share here in my journey to moving to this space, that it really is real, and it can so much enhance and improve the quality of your life in many ways. Aside from, you don't need to accept anything, you can verify for yourself. So in that small town of Cocoa Beach, Florida, that little church that I spoke, I guess, in tongues at that time, it became a symbol to me of something needed but not found in my life. And every day for years, as I continued to go to school and I go through the other difficult times, this is a very difficult time for me in my life, because I was torn between what was happening that I couldn't explain and what I was told that this is how it is, and it's all over. You've discovered everything that needs to be discovered. And every day for years, I passed by the church to wonder about what was happening there. And I'm afraid of what I felt, and I wish, let the visions and the insight go away, but they wouldn't leave me alone. And this is really my initiation, beginning my high school, my senior years. I really knew very little about spirituality, and what little I learned growing up only made me more desperate. And that bigger life within us, which I call the enlightened mind, continued the education, as we all have to do that hard work. Anyway, it continued that education, and more strange and unusual things are about to happen to me. I tried to fit in. I wanted to fit in and be like everybody else, but I failed. And the more I try to fit in, the more unhappy my life becomes. Outwardly, I act as though I'm happy, but I even can't convince myself that I'm really feeling that. And like many people in this world, I put on a smiling face every day, and everybody asks me, how you doing? I say, oh, I'm doing fine. But I feel at this point like an empty shell, in some ways more dead than alive. And I wonder, I'm 17 years old, isn't there more to this? Isn't there more to life than this? This is the question everybody needs to answer for themselves. Isn't there more to this? Isn't there a way to open up the wealth of all of these wonderful qualities that we see in the babies, so fully exhibited? They don't have to take a class. How do I do that? And I wonder about that. So this will be the end of that chapter, and the next continual discussion that we'll have will be chapter 6, Lost in a Sea of Suffering. And I certainly was lost at that point. And I'll just read you the poem beginning that one just before, and then we'll pick up on chapter 6 next time. A sun burst 1 billion years ago and spread itself everywhere, that we may stand here today. The life of our body, the elements of our body, was formed in the heart of that star long, long ago. Is it possible that in the same way, God gave us his being and became all that there is, and we are here to search for that and live that limitless love and live it forever? This is all that we're looking for in all our running about this world, a love that does not die. And we're trying to collect it in the outward sphere. We don't realize that, honestly, that's hiding within you. And this is the secret journey to the enlightened mind. So I wish you all the best today. Go out and do something good. Do a random act of kindness. Go meet somebody, smile at them, hold your kids, hold your pets, contribute. We're here to bring something into this world. And ultimately we come in, clutching as a baby, and ultimately when the time's over, which is going to be quicker than we think, we go out empty. Let's commit to whatever that is and take that step, that tiny step today, and express the love that you are that's hiding behind. And if you aren't feeling that, I understand. You know, accept and feel whatever's going on in the body, the emotions. There's a whole technology that can help you wipe that stuff out of your mind, your intellect and ego. All those deep pains inside, they can be erased. But you need to learn how to do that. And this is actually not the organization, but this is actually the art of how to live. And it belongs to the entire world. It doesn't belong to some group of individuals. It's a very deep and profound science. So wishing you well on this wonderful day.